What does sacred mean? If we say something is sacred, what makes it sacred? Why is it sacred? Today, I want to look at this concept. Sacred is a word too limited, like most words, to carry its full meaning. Humans use words to access and come into relationship with meaning. We develop words to name concepts like love or perfection, things like zebra or flower, and experiences like an embrace or a memory. Words are the naming aspect of discovering meaning and consolidating it into symbols or letters for better understanding, explanation, and conversation. So, what is the definition of sacred? It means hallowed or hallowed, consecrated or made holy by association with divinity or divine things or by religious ceremony or sanction. It's a past participle adjective from a now obsolete verb, sakron, to make holy or whole. So a sacred moment is experiencing wholeness, if only for a few breaths. It is dwelling within a sacred concept, using sacred things to have a sacred experience. It is a respite or a break from the brokenness of ourselves and our fallen world, a space where we experience wholeness or holiness. Even though we are born good, God said, "It is good. You are good. We are created good in the image and likeness of God." We still understand that there's a brokenness about us. There's a fallenness about our world. So when we look at the word sacred, it is a holy space, if only for a few breaths, where we experience wholeness. Related words are Sabbath, like a respite from work, toil, and suffering. Sacrament, a cosmic partaking of the divine. Secret, meaning mysterious or mystical. Words cannot fully describe this concept of sacred. So in order to sort of explore it, I want to look at some sacred patterns and practices. We're going to look at the pattern of sacred mountains and the experiences of sacred practices found in religion, spirituality, and the natural world. So the first pattern I want to look at is the pattern of sacred mountains. When we see a pattern repeated over thousands of years across multiple cultures, we realize it is part of our human story. It's part of the matrix. It is part of our existence, and it's important to pay attention to that pattern. Sacred mountains are found in religions, spirituality, art, architecture, and symbolism in the material and spiritual worlds. And examples of sacred mountains are Mount Kailash in Hinduism, Jainism, and Buddhism, Mount Sinai in the Abrahamic religions, Mount Hira in Islam, which is where Muhammad went up to receive his revelations, which eventually became the Quran, Mount Fuji in Shinto, the four sacred mountains in the Navajo tradition, and we're going to also look at the Garden of Eden in Paradise, Genesis. And you can see this model or this pattern over and over again, the pyramid pattern. You can see it in multiple layers of life. So let's look at a little bit about this. Mount Kailash is located in western Tibet. It's a sacred peak and popular pilgrimage and destination revered by Buddhists, Hindus, Jains, and Bon practitioners, and it's known as the precious snow mountain. It has never been climbed due to religious importance and government bans, and it is considered the abode of the gods. So a lot of times at these the summits, we see that there are deities or divine revelation, gods, goddesses in these different traditions. Mount Sinai, also known as Jabal Musa, or Mountain of Moses. It's a holy site in Judaism, Christianity, and Islam, and it's the place where Moses went to receive the 10 Commandments, divine revelation. But these are not just physical places, and their physical place is important, but let's look at also their symbolism, their stories. So in Mount Sinai, the story and symbolism that we see here is that when Moses goes up to the summit, at the summit is God. is divine revelation. And at the base, we see worship of the golden calf. What does that represent? Worship of money, worship of material idols as replacements for personal spiritual responsibility and development. Everything is an exchange. So in order to ascend the mountain, we have to leave behind worship of our own animalistic behaviors. We have to leave behind things that we want to shed off of us, addictions, things that we are holding up as idols, whether it's money or a job or a relationship. Sometimes we have to submit those and not stay in slavery to certain thoughts and certain ways of being that are not helpful, that are holding us back from ascending the mountain, because at the top is where we are transformed into the image of God. It's where divine revelation happens. All right, the Diné Navajo flag is another example. The sacred mountains. You can see on here that there are 4 sacred mountains. In the east, there's the white. In the south, the blue. In the west, the yellow. And in the north, black. So for the Diné people, Diné is the word that Navajo would call themselves. Navajo is a term that was given to the Diné people by Europeans that came and, had interactions, and there could have been obviously broken communication, but they call themselves Diné. Okay, so for the Diné people, our sacred mountains are more than silhouettes on the horizon. They are living relatives. They define our homeland, ground our prayers, and carry teachings passed down through generations. So here we can see that these sacred mountains define something. They ground us. The physical world grounds us in the spiritual world. We need, because we're physical beings, material beings, we need that mix of the material and the spiritual, or the material and the immaterial. So they remind us who we are, where we come from, and how we are meant to walk in this land, how we are meant to walk. The holy people bring the information of how to walk. What is the way? What is the divine revelation? What are the laws? How do we live on this planet and exist properly? So from Blanca Peak in the east to Mount Taylor in the south to the San Francisco Peaks in the west and Hesperus Mountain in the north, these mountains form the sacred boundaries of Diné Bikéyah. Within them live our identity, our responsibilities, and our connection to Hojo, balance, and harmony. These mountains are our teachers. Hojo is a beautiful Diné Navajo concept that is hard to translate into English, but it has to do with harmony and beauty and walking in the way of beauty. Okay, so this is another example of sacred mountains. We can also see sacred mountains in architecture, in churches, in stupas, in temples, all kinds of architecture that shows kind of this ascension, this way of transformation. So what makes these mountains physically and spiritually sacred? They are symbols of perfection, of divine ascent and revelation. They represent a human ascending to the realm of deities, gods and goddesses, angels, bodhisattvas, holy beings, etc. They are symbols of human transformation and development of the divinity, godliness, holiness, wholeness within us. It's part of our work here. It's part of our purpose here. As physical and spiritual beings with the ability to access both realms, we need the embrace of the sacred for wholeness. We can also see this concept of ascension in art. Here is a metaphor in Buddhism. The Lamrim is a well-mapped path. It illustrates taming of the elephant as an illustration of taming the mind, step by step. So beginning and ending, but you can see at the very top, there's also the symbol of the sacred mountain again. In Diné Navajo, the emergent stories, the origin stories, coming up through the worlds into the fourth world, which is the glittering world, this world now, where the sun shines and it causes the water to glitter. It causes dew to glitter on the grasses. And at the very top are the deities or the holy people. In Eastern Orthodox Christianity, I love the example of the ladder of divine ascent. This Eastern Orthodox icon shows Christian monks ascending to Jesus Christ. And you can see the demons sort of trying to pull them down, but being transformed into the image of Christ, stepping towards theosis, which is a fascinating concept in Eastern Orthodoxy, where you're becoming like God, not God's essence. You're not becoming God's essence, but we can partake of the energies of God, God's grace, forgiveness, being transformed into the image of Christ. So this represents our daily internal battle that we deal with, of good and evil, of wanting to say things and wanting to do things that we know we shouldn't do, we shouldn't say, and this internal battle, but ascending, becoming more and more transformed into the image of Christ. We can also experience the sacred through practices and our sensory. We're sensory beings. So sensory sacredness happens through our sight. When we see symbolism, art, architecture, that resonates with the wholeness, the holiness within us. Smell, aromatic incense, and oils. I love the concept of the Creator making frankincense and then bringing it to himself as a babe, as Jesus. Frankincense, taste, bread and wine, partaking, hearing, spiritual music, chanting, prayers, touching holy water, baptism, purification rituals. Humans engage in rituals where the intermingling of matter and spirit awakens or brightens the image of the divine within us as we participate in a sacred moment of holiness or wholeness. We are in a sacred liminal space for healing and purification and enlightenment. Liminal is a space where you're not that anymore and you're not yet something new. You're in this liminal space. We see this in rite of passage ceremonies for boys and girls. So the girl is she's no longer a girl, but she's not yet a woman. She's in a liminal space where in certain indigenous ideas, this concept of changing woman, and she's changing and she's moving through this liminal space. It's a sacred space. We can also experience sacred practice in nature. It's the perfume of flowers, the washing of our bodies and souls in waterfalls, seeing the fractal patterned beauty of leaves, the taste of wild berries, and hearing bird songs. It's feeling something in the wind that makes you shiver with sacred awe. It's the realization that everything is a gift. It is, I want to propose, a shared memory of paradise. Paradise in Genesis is a mountain. The rivers flow downwards. They split into four, and it talks about where they flow. But in Genesis 2, it says, God caused every tree beauty to the sight, and good for food, deliciousness, to grow from the ground. Also in the middle of the garden were the tree of life and the tree of learning the knowledge of good and evil. Now a river went out of Eden to water the garden, and from there it separated into four heads. 4 rivers flow down the mountains. Paradise calls for our return back up the mountain, and we strive to recreate paradise through our relationships, our laws, education, deeds, to restore harmony between humans, animals, and nature. And some people even do this as their job. They're working with animals or they're working with nature, and we're trying to restore these things. Or you're a counselor and you're trying to restore a human being into a paradise, a way of being, a peaceful space, a place of beauty and harmony. Like Adam, who is every man, and Eve, who is every woman, we are outside paradise looking in. We have a concept of paradise, and we're being called to restore paradise externally and internally through sacred practices. So sacred, just to close with one of my favorite quotes by Father Seraphim Rose, the connection between paradise and our contemporary world is a very profound one, because in the beginning, paradise was part of earth, an elevated place like a mountain. When Adam was cast out of paradise, he went lower down the slope and began living there. And I also think this is a really amazing and fascinating drawing by Jonathan Pageau called The Cosmic Mountain, where you can see Jesus on the sacred mountain of Golgotha. And this concept of all of these things that are part of our existence in the material world, but in the spiritual world, this intermingling, suffering, carrying our cross, but going through things, learning things in order to transform and enter a fullness of sacredness, of holiness, of wholeness. I hope you've enjoyed this short teaching on what is sacred.